Hey again, and welcome to this new video of the 3D game programming series for Web Engine 2.0. On the last video we finished the programming of the different behaviors needed for the game logic, so it's time to add some pretty cool effects. Especially in this video we will create three different effects. The first of all will be the space dust particles for filling the space void while we are crossing it and giving a more speed feeling. The second one will be the fire explosion particles for the ship destruction. And the third one will be the sound management, adding the engine and the explosion sound. So to start creating the space dust particle, we will create first of all the dust material. We have a smoke particle texture, so we will create a material just with it. Just right click on the Asset Details panel and click on the Create Material button. For this material, we'll just use the standard material and select on the diffuse path the smoke particle that we mentioned before. This is really foggy, and we will disable the lighting and add it to the additive layer type. Okay? I think it's better to change the alpha of the material to make it like more transparent. This is fine, I guess. Okay, let's create it. I rename it to smoke material. Next one, we will create the particle system. So here in the entity hierarchy, we click on the create entity and click on the particle 3D system button. And it will place a particle system in the center of the screen with a default texture, which we will change immediately. So in the materials map component of the particle 3D entity, we click and select the smoke material. As you can see, we can see the behavior of the particle system in real time in the editor. So it's really interesting just changing parameter of the particle system 3D component will change the behavior, and we can see it in real time. For example, we disable the emit, the particle system stop emitting. We can change the number of particles. We can change the emitter shape with different values, change the emitter size. For this time, I think it's better just make a bigger one. We can change the local velocity, the random velocity, which is the dispersion of the particle, the random dispersion. If we set it to 0, we can see clearly the different shapes. So for rectangle, circle, and field circle. For this particle system, we want a field rectangle, and we will add like a random velocity of 0.03 maybe, to add like a little vertical dispersion, because we will put the particle system quite far away from the chip. Like here. We can also change the gravity value to make it fall. We can change the initial angle, the rotation speed. The rotation speed will be randomized. So in this case, we can set like this value for rotation speed and this another value for rotation speed. And we can see that the particles are rotating slightly. We can also change the min size and maximum size to make it like 2 for everyone, to make like particle bigger, we can see like a white spot here. That's because we have a lot of particles, so we reduce the amount of them. So we can see a really transparent dust effect. So yeah, I think we have like a good effect. We will add this particle, we will call it like smoke. We will drag it into the chip entity to make it a child of it. So we have here the particle system, and we place like further there, and we click on the simulate button. We can see that we need more life to the particle, so we will change this like a little bit. Instead of max life of 1, we'll set it 2, and the minimum life we'll set it also to 1, and we click on simulate. I think the particle life will be longer, so you can cross the particles, the dust. So I think we need another little particle effects for the space dust, which is like tiny particles. So we will create another particle 3D system that will place here. And I think for that effect, we can just reuse the star material because it's really similar. So if we select it, for now it's just more like a Star Trek effect. So we want to change it. So the first of all, we have just to make it smaller. We can change the min size to 0.01 and the max size to 0.05. We can change again the random velocity with the same values of before, and to change the local velocity to 0. We can set it like fill rectangle as a emitter shape and the size of 8. With a life of 1, and as we did before, we rename it as dust and drag it into the chip like this, and we can place again far away. If we click on the simulate button, we can see that now the particle is created properly. So great, for the explosion effect we will create an explosion entity, and when the game is over we will place the explosion entity into the shape position and make its particle system to start emitting. So for now we will create a new particle system, and for doing that I think it's better before just create a material for this particle texture. So let's right click, create material. On the diffuse path, select the particle fire, disable the lighting, and set it to the additive layer. Rename to fire material. And then right click here in the entity panel, create a new component, a new particle system as we did before. On the materials path, default materials path, we select the file material. We can see here now it's better. So for this particle, we will set the emit checkbox to false, and by code, when we want to explode, set it back to 1 to start the explosion. We also want the random velocity like this, but we don't want a local velocity, so the local velocity will be 0 and explosion will be everywhere. We don't want gravity, but we do want rotation speed. We can appreciate that the particle is rotating. And this parameter, the end delta scale, tell us the final scale of the particle. So at the end we will set like 0 to make it the fire to disappear. We will call this explosion. And this will be an entity. When the chip is destroyed, we will just move back to that position. To do that, first of all, we will set its emit value to false, and we will add a property to the asteroid manager here, and we will another one which we pass the explosion effects in the asteroid manager. When we detect that the chip collide with an asteroid, we will use this behavior to place the explosion back in place. So we open the Visual Studio solution, open C# solution here in the file menu. We save the project. So if we open the asteroid manager, we will create a new property of the behavior. It will be similar to the chip path. We want an entity path for the explosion entity. So we can just make it similar to the chip path. And on the explosion entity. And in the initialize method, in the similar way of the chip, we will ask the entity manager for the explosion entity. Only if it's not null. And in the game over method here, when we tell the ship to get destroyed, we will set the position of the explosion and set its emit property to true. We set the ship position to the explosion position, and then the emit property to set it to true. And it's really important, in the reset method, we will set it back to false. So, okay, let's rebuild the project. Go back to the editor, reload it. And now we have an explosion effect here and the asteroid manager. In the explosion path new property that we can see here, we can select the explosion, and that will tell the behavior that this entity here will be placed on the position of the ship path, whether the asteroid crashes with an asteroid. If we click on the simulate button, we crash one asteroid, we see that the explosion takes effect. Maybe we can make the explosion life smaller. First of all, we have to with less particles. The emitter size will be 0. Okay, better, no. And the emit rate we can say like 50. Maybe the velocity is not so nice. Select back to false. I think it's nice for now. And the last thing we need to do is just adding the sound effects. In the assets folder, sound folder, we have two different sounds. So we just want to create a new sound 3D here. And in the sound path, we select the engine. We want to place it as a child of the chip entity. Well, first of all, we will rename it. Then we can adjust the position of the engine just to make it like this here. We click on play, we can see that the sound already is playing. And we want another effects for the explosion. We create another 3D sound. In the sound path we select the explosion sound asset, rename it to explosion sound. We drag it back into the explosion entity. Here, and in this case we don't want to play automatically, and we do not want to make it like a loop sound. So let's, for example, change the distance scale, like 5, for example, to make like the range of the sound wider. And in the code, back into the code, we want to play that sound when the explosion takes effect. At the same time, we want to stop the sound of the chip once the chip is crashed. So let's go back to it. It's really easy and straightforward. Here in the game over method, it as easier to just find the child called explosion sound, find its sound emitter 3D component, and play it. And on the other side, on the chip behavior, in the game over method, we just can find the engine sound entity of the owner entity, just calling define child method, find its component sound emitter 3D, and maybe set the volume to 0. And in the reset method, set it back to 1. It's as easier as this. We rebuild the project, go back to the editor again, on the simulate button, we can hear the chip, we can avoid asteroid, and we click and we crash in one of them. We explode with a particular sound effect. So I think that's all for creating our first game. We learned how to use the assets. I learned how to place them on the thing. We learned how to create materials. We learned how to code our game, to create the game logic, to create the collision detection, to make the chip controller. And with that last video, we learned how to create the sound effects and the particle effects. As an improvement, it would be nice to add an acceleration to the chip to make it harder as time passes. Another thing, maybe adjust the asteroid sizes, but I think it's a really cool game in really small amount of time. So I think you enjoyed creating a game with us. And in the next video, we will adapt this game for mobile devices. So stay tuned and I hope you enjoyed our videos. Thank you very much.